And here to discuss the Democratic governor of the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. His new book is out today. It's called Where We Keep the Light, Stories from a Life of Service. Governor, I'm going to talk about your book in a sec, but obviously a lot going on in the world. Let's start with Minnesota. You have said that Trump has to terminate the immigration operation there and fire DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Today, Governor Walz's office said that Walz met with Trump border czar Tom Homan. The two agreed on the need for an ongoing dialogue. Do you think Homan taking the reins while Customs and Border Patrol Commander Bavino is being shown the door, do you think that suggests things are going to improve? Or do you think Bavino is just kind of the administration's fall guy here for what's been going on in the last few weeks there?
Look, Jake, until I hear that the mission has changed, I don't think it matters who's in charge of it. I'm glad they're communicating with Governor Walz, don't get me wrong, but until I hear the President of the United States say, we're not going to target people just because they have an accent. We're not going to wreak havoc on a community. We're going to demask these federal officials so that there can be some trust in the community that they really are there to remove real criminals from a community. Until I hear that the mission has changed, I don't really care who's in charge. And look, I hope the Congress of the United States exercises its authority this Friday when they have a vote on this. I'm encouraged to hear more and more Republicans speaking up. There should be easily the ability to put together a majority that stops funding this type of mission and puts some guardrails on the Trump administration.
The White House and their supporters have accused the governor and Minneapolis Mayor Frye of making immigration enforcement operations harder than they need to be in terms of their actions and their rhetoric, encouraging protesters. Let's look at one comment that Governor Walz made that's under scrutiny right now. Take a listen. Holocaust Museum wrote in response, quote, Anne Frank was targeted and murdered solely because she was Jewish. Leaders making false equivalencies to her experience for political purposes is never acceptable, unquote. What's your take on what the governor said?
Look, here's what I know to be true in Minnesota. The federal officials have eviscerated the trust that should exist between law enforcement and the community by virtue of how they've gone about the operations. I'm the former chief law enforcement officer of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Jake. You know, we've talked about these issues over the years. I think the most important tool that law enforcement needs when they go into a community to try and keep the peace or make people safe is to have trust with the community they are policing. I think it is undeniable that people are scared, that people feel fearful, and it is undeniable that that trust that needs to exist between law enforcement and the public simply does not exist between these federal agents and the community that they are there in theory to serve. And so I think the mission needs to be terminated. It needs to end. Fear is a real thing. But the reality is we need to end this mission and move forward.
Fear is a real thing, but do you have any issues with Governor Walz equating kids hiding in their attics in Minnesota with Anne Frank?
Yeah, look, I get the point that the governor was trying to make. I'm not sure that I would articulate it that way, but I think the underlying point that he's trying to make is a real one, that people are fearful and that trust that should exist between a community and the people that are there in theory to protect and serve them, that has been eviscerated. It needs to be returned, and the best way to return that is to get these federal officials out of Minneapolis and allow the Minneapolis police to continue to do the important work they do to keep people safe.
Get those officials out of Minneapolis. They might be coming to Pennsylvania cities. You've said that if Pittsburgh or Philly or any other city in Pennsylvania is the next spot for the ICE raids, you've been planning for it, you say, and the courts and communities have started preparing. What exactly does that look like? You write in your book about having a track record of working across party lines. Will you work with the Trump administration, or what is the plan?
I'll work with anyone to keep the people of Pennsylvania safe, and I will also stand up to anyone that tries to undermine the safety and security of a community. We work with our law enforcement partners at the federal, obviously state and local level to keep people safe. And as a result of that work, violent crime is down 12% in Pennsylvania. Fatal gun violence is down about 43% in our Commonwealth. We've invested in hiring 2,000 more police officers, and we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars in violence prevention initiatives at the local level. What we are doing is working. What we don't want are outside forces coming in and eroding that trust and creating chaos. You know, Donald Trump and his administration love to put themselves out there as the party of law and order. What we see from them is not law and order, but chaos and division. And I would argue that I believe they are acting outside the bounds of the law in Minneapolis. And not just the two incidents that resulted in the death of Mr. Preddy and Miss Good, but just the very premise of their mission being there. I think that's outside the law and the bounds of the 10th Amendment, And so it is something we are prepared for, and I will work with anyone to keep people safe, but I'll stand up to anyone that undermines that safety.
Governor Shapiro, stick around. We have much more to discuss about your book, about your future in politics. We're going to squeeze in a quick break. We'll be right back. And we're back with Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. So, Governor, let's talk about your book. You say you ultimately decided to take your name out of the vice presidential running with candidate Kamala Harris, then the vice president, after a one-on-one meeting with her that featured some clashes, including about Israel, the one like I just talked about. You say it was offensive and that the Harris-Shapiro pairing was not a great fit. Did you also have deeper concerns about maybe hitching your wagon to a losing campaign?
No, and look, I did everything in my power to try and help the vice president win, and I wish she would have. The country would have been in a far better place than it is right now. I would just, respectfully push back on your word clashes. I actually appreciate to this day the fact that the vice president was direct with me and honest with me, and I hope she appreciates that I was direct and honest back with her. I thought that we had a really constructive conversation, and after that conversation and reflection and conversation with my wife and our kids, I think we just determined that this was not the best way for me to serve. This was not the best way for me to have an impact on making people's lives better, and that's why I picked up the phone and called, I guess, roughly 48 hours before she made her announcement that Governor Walz would be her running mate, that I did not want to be included in those deliberations. I went after that and did everything in my power to support Governor Walz and Vice President Harris, both in Pennsylvania and across the country, traveling for them, filming an ad for them, doing everything I could. I wish she would have won. And so, to the heart of your question, this was not a political calculus about her winning or losing. This was about the best way I could possibly serve.
It was also a period where you were being criticized more than other Democrats for your position on Israel and the war in Gaza from Israel, even though you were more critical of Benjamin Netanyahu than, at the time, Vice President Harris or Tim Walz or Andy Beshear or any of the other possible candidates for VP. And activists were calling you Genocide Josh. There was a really ugly explosion of anti-Semitism. You write about anti-Semitism at the start of your book because of that horrific attack on the governor's mansion during Passover. And you write in your book, quote, "Of course, anti-Semitism has gotten impossible to ignore over the last few years, much scarier, much more real, both in the number of incidents and how present it feels around us. I often have people come tell me they were comforted by the fact that I was willing to live my life openly and proudly as a Jew, that it gave them confidence to do the same." And I wonder if, there has been this explosion of anti-Semitism on the right that we've seen conservatives grappling with and refusing to grapple with in some cases. It's really ripped apart the Conservative Heritage Foundation and other places. Do you think your party, the Democratic Party, has had the reckoning on anti-Semitism that it needs to?
Look, I think it is clear and an undeniable truth that anti-Semitism is a problem on the political left and on the political right. And it shouldn't be hard for anyone to acknowledge that. I think it is important to separate out the two different conversations that need to be had, and both were kind of lumped in to your question. I mean that respectfully, Jake. One is about the policy in the Middle East and Israeli policy. And as you correctly noted, I have over many years been very critical of the Netanyahu administration and what they've done both in Israel and in Gaza. And at the same time, while there's nuance around that, we need to have the ability to have that foreign policy conversation that is critical of Israel, along with other countries, and certainly of Hamas, a terrorist group.
There have
On
been
the flip side, if I may just finish the thought, on the flip side, there is no nuance when it comes to anti-Semitism or hatred or bigotry in any form. It should not be hard for the right or the left to stand up and condemn it. And I think it is critically important that voices come together from the Democratic Party, Republican Party, to stand in unity against anti-Semitism. That is a black and white issue, while the other issues are much more nuanced.
So last question before you go, sir, and I know you have a big calendar ahead with this book, but you have won every election you've ever run for, with the exception of one. When you ran for student body president at the same high school that I went to. I'm 4 years older than you, so we didn't really overlap in terms of like our social circles.
Did you vote in that election? I guess you wouldn't have voted.
I wouldn't have voted. I was the outgoing. I was gone. I was gone by the time you ran for president. I was in college. I had other things on my mind, but I was the student body president when I was there, and I'm wondering, what do you think it is about me that I was able to win that election, the one election in your entire life that you were not able to win?
So you're 1-0, and as I write in the book, I'm 12-1. I think I would take my record over yours. Look, Jake, I think I ran for student council president in the high school to impress a girl who ultimately was not particularly impressed by that. But I did get to marry her a few years later, and we've been married 28 years. And I think if you would have asked her at that moment in that election where I was embarrassing myself, if I'd be the one guy in class to end up as governor of Pennsylvania, I think she'd probably pick everybody else in our class over me.
So I'll just say this. Thank you for acknowledging that my record is 1,000. And second of all, I definitely didn't impress any girls by winning student body president. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, thanks so much.
Good to be with you.